Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Thinking about creatine, it used to be, purely the domain of serious bodybuilders.
Totally. Big tubs of white powder.
Exactly. And now you hear about it everywhere. Older adults are looking into it for healthy aging, just trying to stay strong.
Yeah, and there's definitely chatter about it for women, especially around perimenopause and menopause. It shows how things shift.
It really does. And that's exactly what we're digging into today, the actual science behind creatine. We want to move past just the hype.
Right, beyond just it builds muscle. What does the latest research really say about building and keeping lean body mass?
Precisely. We've got a couple of key sources. There's a recent health news piece that touches on that longevity angle and the interest from women.
Okay.
And more importantly for our focus today, a brand new scientific paper. This one might actually make us rethink some common ideas about creatine and muscle.
Ooh, intriguing. So the mission today is unpacking that new study, seeing how it potentially changes the picture.
That's the plan. We'll look at what this research found about lean mass, but keep in mind that other source hints at wider benefits, maybe for aging or even brain health, which we can touch on.
Okay, sounds good. So tell us about this new study. Where did it come from?
So this was a clinical trial led by researchers out of the University of New South Wales. It was published in the journal Nutrients.
Right. And what was the main question they were trying to answer?
They really wanted to pin down creatine monohydrate's effect on lean body mass in a couple of specific ways.
Okay.
First, what happens if you just take creatine without changing your exercise routine? They called this a wash-in period.
Ah, okay. Isolating the supplement effect first.
Exactly. And then what happens when you combine that creatine with a proper resistance training program?
That wash-in phase sounds key. Because lots of older studies just started both at once, didn't they?
They did. Which makes it tricky to know if the gains were purely from the training, purely from the creatine, or the combination. This study tried to separate that out.
Smart. So how did they actually set it up? Who took part?
It was a randomized controlled trial, the gold standard, really. They had 54 healthy adults, men and women, aged 18 to 50.
And these weren't gym rats already.
No, that was part of the criteria. They were doing less than the minimum recommended exercise per week, so more like average folks starting out.
Okay. And what did the training involve?
It was a solid 12-week resistance program, 3 supervised sessions a week, hitting the whole body.
Compound lifts, isolate.
Both. Squats, presses, that kind of thing, plus more targeted exercise. They aimed for 4 sets in the 6 to 12 rep range, typical muscle building zone.
Sounds like a decent program. And the creatine part?
Right, so half the group took 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily. And here's the crucial bit you mentioned. They started it 1 full week before the exercise began. That was the wash-in.
Gotcha. And the other half?
They were the control group. Same exercise program, but no creatine supplement.
And how did they measure the changes? Muscle gain specifically?
They used DEXA scans, that's dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. It gives a pretty detailed picture of body composition, including lean mass.
When did they do the scans?
At the very beginning, so baseline. Then again, after that 7-day creatine-only wash-in week, and then a final scan after the full 12 weeks of training.
Comprehensive. Did they track food too? Diet can make a difference.
Yep, participants kept food logs. The researchers wanted to make sure diet wasn't a confounding factor, that both groups were eating similarly.
Okay, makes sense. So wash-in week, then 12 weeks of lifting, creatine versus no creatine. What were the big takeaways? What did they find?
This is where it gets really interesting. During that first week, the wash-in period,
Yeah, the creatine-only group.
they did gain a bit more lean body mass compared to the control group, on average about half a kilogram or just over a pound.
Okay, so creatine does something on its own initially.
It seems so. And they noted it was particularly noticeable in the female participants. But, and this is a big but, that gain varied a lot between people. And critically, it didn't seem to last or translate into bigger gains later. It kind of dropped off.
So maybe not actual muscle tissue being built in that first week. Could it be water retention? Creatine is known for that.
That's exactly what the researchers suspect. That initial bump might have been more about cells holding on to water, which DXA can pick up as lean mass rather than new muscle protein.
Right. So what happened after the 12 weeks of actual training? Did the creatine group pull ahead then?
Well, here's the headline finding. After 12 weeks, both groups, The creatine group and the non-creatine group gained a significant amount of lean body mass, about 2 kilograms on average.
Okay, so the training worked for everyone. That's good.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But the crucial point is, there was no significant difference in the amount of muscle gain between the two groups.
Wow, so taking 5 grams of creatine daily didn't lead to more muscle growth than just doing the resistance training alone.
According to this specific study, nope. The standard dose didn't seem to add anything extra on top of the gains from lifting weights.
And the food logs confirmed their diets were similar.
Yeah, no major differences there either. Huh. That definitely challenges the common perception, doesn't it? That creatine is almost guaranteed to give you an edge in muscle building.
It really does. And it points back to the study design. The researchers themselves suggest that maybe the benefits seen in older studies were a bit overestimated.
Because they mixed the creatine and exercise from day one.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
If creatine causes that initial, maybe water-based, increase in measured lean mass right at the start, and you measure the total gain from day one.
It could look like creatine caused more overall muscle growth, even if the rate of actual muscle building during the training phase wasn't that different.
Exactly. That wash-in period in this new study was really important for potentially piecing that apart. It highlights that initial effect versus the effect during training.
So does this mean creatine is useless for muscle gain? Or just that 5 grams isn't the magic number when combined with training?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The researchers don't say it's useless. They actually suggest the opposite, kind of.
Yeah.
They propose that maybe 5 grams per day just isn't enough to see those additional benefits on top of a solid training program.
So maybe a higher dose is needed.
That's what they're recommending for future research. They specifically mention exploring a dose of 10 grams per day.
10 grams. Wow, that's double the typical advice you usually hear.
It is, but it suggests the mechanism might still be there, just needing a stronger push, perhaps.
So for the average person hitting the gym and taking their 5 grams, maybe temper expectations about extra muscle growth from the creatine itself.
Based on the study, yeah, it leans that way. Focus on the training, the creatine might help in other ways, but maybe not dramatically boost the muscle gain from lifting at that dose.
And for athletes, especially those worried about weight classes or water retention.
This could definitely inform their strategy, right?
Yeah.
When to take it, how much, understanding that initial potential fluid shift.
Okay, this is super insightful, but like all studies, it probably has limitations, things we need to keep in mind.
Absolutely. You always have to look at the context. One big thing is the duration.
Only 12 weeks of training.
Right. It's a decent amount of time to see changes, but maybe some benefits of creatine take longer to really show up. We don't know the long-term picture from this alone.
We already mentioned the water retention issue. They suspected it, but didn't directly measure body water.
Correct. That's a key limitation. Measuring total body water would have helped clarify if that initial lean mass gain in the creatine group was just fluid. DXA can be influenced by hydration status.
So that initial half-kilo difference might not have been muscle at all.
It's a strong possibility, yeah.
What else? Anything about the participants?
Well, there was that variability in the initial response during the wash-in. Some people gain more, some less. Why? We don't know for sure.
Individual responses always complicate things.
They do. Also, for the female participants, they didn't track menstrual cycles. Fluid retention fluctuates naturally with the cycle, which could add noise to the measurements.
Good point. And did they check if people were actually absorbing the creatine well?
Nope, individual absorption rates weren't measured. And they didn't get super detailed long-term diet history, like vegetarian versus meat eater status, which impacts baseline creatine levels.
Right, because vegetarians usually start with lower levels.
Exactly. And finally, while people reported taking the supplement, it wasn't directly supervised, though compliance seemed high based on what people said.
Okay, so some important caveats, but still a really interesting piece of the puzzle. What did the actual study authors say about their findings?
Dr. Mandy Hagstrom, the senior author, was pretty direct. She said that in their study, 5 grams daily didn't make a difference to the amount of lean muscle gained from the resistance training.
And she echoed that point about previous studies maybe overstating things.
Yes, suggesting it might be down to those methodological issues like starting everything at once.
And the first author, Dr. Imtiaz Desai.
He basically agreed, saying the lack of an extra benefit during the exercise phase hints that 5 grams might just not be enough stimulus for that specific purpose, building more muscle on top of training.
Which leads back to their call for research on higher doses, like 10 grams.
Right. And Dr. Hagstrom also pointed out that higher doses, like 10 grams, have shown promise in other research areas, looking at things like brain health or bone density.
Ah, Okay, so that connects back to the broader picture we mentioned at the start from the Health News article. That article mentioned experts like Dr. Peter Attia talking about muscle for longevity.
Right, the importance of building muscle for overall health as you age.
And the general idea that creatine can support strength training? This study just adds a layer of nuance about how much extra muscle growth you get at that common 5-gram dose.
Precisely. It refines the understanding. And that news article also had a good point from David Brady.
What was that?
He cautioned that creatine isn't a magic pill. You can't just take it and expect muscle if you're sitting on the couch. You need the stimulus, the exercise.
Which this study reinforces, right?
Yeah.
The training was essential for everyone gaining muscle.
Absolutely. And one last point from that news article, it mentioned a wider meta-analysis confirming creatine generally has few, if any, significant negative side effects. That's important safety context when we discuss potentially using higher doses.
Definitely good to know. Okay, so we've really unpacked this study and its implications. It gives us a lot to think about regarding creatine and muscle. What's a final thought for our listeners to chew on?
Well, given these findings, it really prompts a question, doesn't it? How might you or how might future research adjust the way we think about using creatine, especially considering dosage and maybe different populations or goals?
Yeah, like maybe the optimal dose isn't one size fits all.
Exactly. And it's just a great reminder to, look past the marketing hype for any supplement and really value rigorous scientific investigation. What does the evidence actually say?
So true. And maybe don't discount creatine entirely based on this one study about muscle gain of 5 grams.
Definitely not. As we touched on, there's growing interest in its other potential roles, like brain function, which that news article mentioned. That's worth exploring further, too.
Absolutely. So keep thinking critically, maybe explore some of that other research. And we'd love to hear from you. What are your experiences or questions about creatine? Let us know. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.